Shattering Myths. We're going to turn the page and have a conversation with one of my very favorite people, al-Rassooli. He's the foremost expert on Islam in the world. He is a man of great courage and conviction. He's written a series of books called The True Faces of called Lifting the Veil, The True Face of Muhammad and Islam. IQ, it's a stunning world that we're living in, a world where Muslims can rape little girls by the tens of thousands, where they can kill innocent civilians by the hundreds of thousands, where they can burn down all manner of buildings and treasures around the world, and a Muslim, particularly a quote-unquote Palestinian Muslim, that is engaged as a terrorist is killed in response to their terrorist behavior, and the whole world goes ballistic and says, boy, you Jews, you're using excessive force.
Yes, I know. I read the news. They burnt the tomb of Joseph.
Yes, they did.
You know, it is amazing. Muslims are allowed by the West, literally by the West, but nobody else. By the West, that means America and Europe, to get away with murder.
Yeah. Mass murder.
Yes, but they are allowed by the West. Not by Russia, not by China, not by India, by the Europeans and the Americans.
Yeah, the Indians hold them accountable. The Russians hold them accountable. But they're not held accountable by any Muslim country, nor are they ever held accountable by America or Israel. Excuse me, not Israel, but Europe.
Yeah.
You know, I hear the story of the Days of Rage. My assumption is that you saw the video that was published by the Israeli media that showed the entire episode of the Muslim ramming his car into a bus stop where unarmed, just average Israeli citizens were sitting there waiting for the bus, women and children, rammed it into the bus stop, jumped out of the car and with a knife, and then began hacking to death those that he had injured by running over them with the car. And that eventually, after doing everything he could to stop the Islamic jihadist, an Israeli finally shot him to death.
Yes. But
the United States comes out and says, you know, you're using excessive force.
Yes, I know. It's excessive force. Killing a Muslim is excessive force. For a Muslim to kill hundreds of thousands of Jews and Christians and others, that's not excessive force. No.
Can you tell me how any moral or sane person can say, you know, the solution to this problem of Muslims terrorizing Jews is to give the terrorist a state taken away from those they have been terrorizing?
Yeah, well, as I said, the ones who are supporting Islam, literally supporting and condoning every action of Muslims, are the West, the Europeans and the Americans.
Yeah. Well, the Europeans and the Americans forced Israel to give the Muslims Gaza. And is Gaza better off or worse off? More destitute, more immoral, more in every depraved human attribute that you can apply to it, and more violent than it was before or after Israel gave it up?
After.
Yeah.
In fact, there was an interview by some Arabs of people who are in Gaza.
Right.
And the ones who were honest, they said they were better off under Israel than under the Hamas. It's on YouTube, by the way. It's available.
Well, of course. Well, it's obvious. I mean, you don't have to listen to them to know that that's the truth. You know, it was interesting that in the time before the United States and Europe began to put forward things like the Camp David Accords and the Oslo Accords, forcing Israel to relinquish authority in the what's called the West Bank, and it's only called the West Bank because it was part of Jordan before the Six-Day War. That before that time, before Israel captured it during the Six-Day War, where Israel defending itself because the Muslims wanted to obliterate the country, that during the time prior to America forcing Israel to give up control, that the Palestinians, this mythical people, but the Arabs, Muslims living in Israel were the most best educated, healthiest, richest, freest, most productive Muslims in the world.
Not only this, never in 66 years of the history of Israel will you find a single Arab from Israel, Israeli Arab, leaving Israel, running away. Not leaving, running away from Israel to go to an Arab country or a Muslim country.
Of course.
Not in 66 years.
Right. But Yasser Arafat, as a product of the Muslim Brotherhood, is sponsored by Egypt to remove this blemish on Islam's resume, because Islam is an arrogant religion. It's a religion from an arrogant God. That's why the statement Allahu Akbar, and so this realization that the most prosperous, the most successful Muslims in the world lived in Israel was, and because of the nature of Israel, and that all of the Muslims around Israel were impoverished, they had to obliterate that condition that created that prosperity. And so that was the purpose of the PLO.
But of course, Muslims cannot tolerate a society which is free. They cannot tolerate a society which is prosperous. They can't. Yeah. Because these societies prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Islam is disgusting, that Islam is corrupt, that Islam is retrograde, that Islam will never progress.
Yeah, all you have to do is compare the countries around Israel with Israel, and you'll know everything you need to know about Islam. And so the reason that Israel has to go is because of two factors from a Muslim point of view. One is the Quran is the most anti-Semitic book ever written, far more anti-Semitic than Hitler's Mein Kampf. And so Jews are blamed for everything. And so they have to go because in the Islamic countries, the way that they control the people is, yeah, your conditions are horrid. Yeah, you have a lousy life. Yes, you have no hope. Then you have no freedom. You have no rights. But it's all the fault of the Jews. It's not our fault. And so they have to have this enemy of the Jews just to continue to promote that myth. And the second reason is that it's obvious that the God of Yisrael and the God of Islam are not equals. One's real, the other's not.
They can't be equal. Besides, when I checked the last time, a few days ago, in fact, the totality of the Muslim world, 1.5 billion in 57 Muslim majority states, cannot produce intellectually, culturally, psychologically, you name it, in any field of human endeavor, equal to what Israel, all combined, by the way. The whole of the Muslim world combined. Cannot outproduce what Israel does.
Oh, I would, I would go further to say that if you're just looking at economy, take oil away because oil is not economy. But if you're talking about a productive economy, then those 57 majority Islamic countries collectively aren't able to outproduce Israel individually. But if you look at the more telling things, like universities, great universities, if you look at invention, if you look at developments and discoveries in the sciences, for example, then you could take the 57 Islamic countries and you could give them go back 100 years, and collectively those 57 countries over the course of the last 100 years are impoverished when compared to Israel's production in the past year.
I agree. That's why I have a challenge. Unfortunately, these challenges are not done for fun. It's done to prove the point. I have a challenge worth $100,000 to find 10 Muslims, 10, in the last 500 years, who have outproduced or produced something for the benefit of humanity in any field of human intellect. That's about 2,000 million Muslims. You can't find 10 of them.
That's because of the nature of the religion. The religion is so twisted, so demented, so irrational, so perverted that there is no way you can be a informed and rational Muslim. It's impossible. And your value system as a Muslim is so corrupted that you can't be a productive individual if you're a good Muslim.
Yeah, Muslims tell us that Quran, Muhammad said in the Quran, seek knowledge. Knowledge in Arabic is called ilm. Mm-hmm. But they don't tell you that what Muhammad said was not knowledge of physics and chemistry and biology and astronomy. The knowledge of ilm that is in the Quran and Hadith has only one purpose, is to study the Quran and Muhammad's Sunnah and nothing else. That's why they're backward.
And if you want to study the Quran and Sunnah, the example of Muhammad, and you want them studied in the only way that they make any sense, which is to put them in the context of Muhammad's life and in chronological order, the single best book ever written on that. I'm going to give it away free, but it's Prophet of Doom. So if you want to study what Muhammad was like, what he said and did, if you want to do what he advised, read Prophet of Doom, prophetofdoom.net. And what you will find is the most reprehensible individual who ever lived.
Correct. And it's free of charge. You offer it free of charge. I offer my services free of charge.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes, because the answers are there. They gave us the answers. They told us why Muslims kill. Why, this whole idea of nation building, the United States bombed Libya into submission with this notion that we could sponsor democracy and freedom and get rid of the dictator. What happens when you get rid of a secular dictator in the Islamic world?
You get the Muslim Brotherhood and Salafis and Boko Haram and ISIS to gain.
Yes.
That's what it do.
That's what you get. What you get is a jihadi state. And if you get stay with the dictator, but you do what we established in Iran, and you bring in a Islamic dictator, you get a state that is every bit as bad as Libya. I'm not sure Libya is much worse than Iran. Iran's much worse than Libya. But those are the three choices: secular dictator, jihadi state, or Islamic state. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. The West, United States in particular, but also Europe, compelled Israel to give up Gaza, to give up all influence in Gaza, and turn it over to Hamas. Did that work, or is that counterproductive?
Of course it's counterproductive. The facts are there to speak for themselves.
Right.
The hundreds of billions of $31 billion were spent on the Palestinians only in the last decade or so. 31 billion.
Right.
And they complain that Israel is stopping the concrete to come in. Well, they use the concrete to build tunnels, not to build hospitals and mosques.
Correct. Now, the next question would be, so with and by the way, in Gaza, did Hamas honor the requirement, which was for it to be demilitarized in Gaza, or was the advent of the accord that gave Hamas control over Gaza increase the number of rockets and other military hardware?
But they broke every rule. Islam always breaks the rules. We agreed. Islam, Muslims cannot ever honor a single agreement they make with an infidel, whether Jew, Christian, Buddhist, or a Hindu. It doesn't matter. Yeah,
it's not your opinion. That's what the Ninth Surah said. People who would like to criticize that should read it. Now, with the Oslo Accords, did the so-called Palestinians honor the terms and agreements of the Oslo Accords?
No. But the tragedy is that the Israelis let them get away with it.
Yeah. Now, is the West Bank, the areas where the Palestinians have autonomy, are there fewer terrorists or more terrorists? Is there more prosperity or less prosperity? How have the trends gone since the Oslo Accords?
Downhill.
In every regard, right?
Correct.
every regard. So why is giving the Muslims in the West Bank more autonomy the right choice if we've been playing this game now for a number of decades, and every time they're given more autonomy, things get worse?
Well, it's simple. To tell you the truth, it's really very simple. Maybe simplistic. The Europeans hate Jews more than they fear Muslims. It's simple. It's not complicated. It's not anti-Semitism. There's no such thing as anti-Semitism for one simple reason. Hitler was not an anti-Semite. Hitler always spoke Juden, always the Jews. He never used the word Semitic. Why? He had the Muslims with him. He had the Arabs. The Arabs are Semitic people. This anti-Semitism is bullcrap. It should not be used. It is anti-Jewish. The Greeks were anti-Jewish. The Romans were anti-Jewish. There were not Semitism. There were no Palestinians. There were Jews.
Yeah, it's interesting, by the way, that the word Shem in Hebrew doesn't just refer to an individual that propagated the races that we know as Semitic races, but Shem is the Hebrew word for personal and proper name. And the one thing that Hitler and Muslims have in common is their hatred for the personal and proper name of the God who used Hebrew to introduce himself by name. So they are anti-Shem, anti-Yahweh's name. That they all do have in common. But I would just tell you that you're correct, that Europe and the United States policies are anti-Israel.
100%.
Right.
I'll tell you why, with all due respect.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
If there is peace between Arabs and Israelis, trillions of dollars in armaments would be down the drain. All these military industrial complexes will collapse.
Right. Correct.
They can't afford to do that.
Right.
They can't afford to have peace.
Yeah. There is no war today. There's no justification for war without fanning the flames of Islamic hatred. It's Islamic hatred that provides the only basis for a U.S. military. I mean, we went so far as to create a riot in the Ukraine and then provide some $25 billion for the Kiev regime to fight a war with ethnic Russians to create the pretense that NATO was somehow viable. That's how desperate they were for an enemy. We took a country that has never threatened America, that has no intent of ever conquering America because they own America, like China, and we're provoking them into a war just to create this pretense that we need a military. But the only place the military is actually used, selling munitions to both sides, is in the Muslim world.
Correct.
And so I agree with you. I think that we are fanning the flames and arming the combatants in the Islamic world because it's the only justification for the military-industrial complex that is the basis of the United States of America. That's pretty sad, isn't it? So, IQ, it seems pretty straightforward. We forced Israel to give up control of Gaza, and Gaza got worse. We forced Israel to relinquish control over the West Bank through the Oslo Accords, and the West Bank conditions got worse. How did things turn out when America tried to nation build in Iraq, your home?
You can't nation build. Not in a Muslim country. You can't ever nation build. There is no such thing as a nation which is Islamic. They're all made up. Yeah. Made up. Iran is made up of maybe 4, 5, 6, 8 division types of people from different cultures, and they hate each other. Afghanistan is exactly the same thing. Libya was the same thing. Iraq was the same thing. They were created by the West.
Yeah, and even if they're all Sunni Muslims, which, like, for example, Libya was almost exclusively Sunni, their divisions then became tribal.
It was always tribal.
So the moment we took out the dictator in Libya, all we had was rival Islamic gangs based on tribal alliances.
But in Iraq, it's also tribal.
Right.
Not only Sunni and Muslim Shia.
Right.
The Shias have got their own tribes, and the Sunnis have got their own tribes.
Yeah, and they can't even get along with each other. Right. And this notion that they can be, that all the people, like that's what Obama says, we want an Iraq without Assad, where everybody is free and all minorities have a voice. That will never happen in any Islamic country, ever. It's just unbelievably stupid. Look what happened when we broke Iraq. The Kurds had to form their own little fiefdom up there in the north, and the Sunnis and Shias are in a civil war against each other.
And the same thing now in Nigeria.
Right.
And it's spilling into Cameroon. It's spilling all over Africa.
Correct.
By the way, Obama is sending some troops, American troops, to Cameroon.
Right.
And he's thinking of extending the stay of the American troops in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So he's reversing everything he said he would do.
Right. He's also sent troops to Nigeria.
Yeah.
And we continue to fly drones over Yemen, even though it's our drones in Yemen that broke the back of that country. So that the only means to hold the Shia militias back were the Sunni militias, and we targeted the Sunni militias so that the Shia militias took control of the country.
It's upside down. Everything the West is doing, literally everything they're doing is wrong.
How can you be a country, and you're having this debate, here we're having this big debate in America now about the Benghazi committee, that's the House committee, and, whether or not they were in a witch hunt against Clinton. How could you look at the details of who said what to whom in Benghazi and not see the big picture? That Obama and Senator McClown from Arizona collectively decided that we would bomb Gaddafi into submission, and we would nation build there. And how could you not see the consequence of that was horrendous? Every bad thing happened.
Hillary Clinton was also guilty, 100% guilty.
And all the work.
The department, she was the head of the state. She was the one who said it was the video.
Oh, of course, yeah. Oh, yeah, and then when you have a consequence of your destruction of that country, be that your embassy is overrun, and then rather than say, it was a mistake, we should not have bombed Gaddafi into oblivion. Yeah, it was a bad dictator, but what we've got now is worse. And what we have now is what led to this, because we supplied the arms to these various jihadists, and the jihadists now have killed us, even though we empowered them, which means we ought not have trusted them. That she says, no, let's blame Benghazi on a Christian film.
But the most remarkable one is they speak about moderate Muslims. I mean, how could any human being with 2 brain cells of logic, having even read the first 9 chapters of the Quran, can think there are moderate Muslims?
Yeah.
They don't get it.
Right, the 9th surah is unequivocal, and that's the second to last revealed, that says there is no such thing as a moderate, peace-loving Muslim. That a person who claims to be a Muslim, who claims to be moderate and peace-loving, is a hypocrite. And the Quran says they cease to be a Muslim so that Allah can torture them after good jihadist Muslims kill them.
Correct.
Just read the 9th surah. It's all there. It's not our opinion. But
Obama, the Western leaders, even Pope Francis came to it. Pope Francis, he said he couldn't find any aggressive verses in the Quran. The leader of 1.2 billion people couldn't find any aggressive verses in the Quran.
Then obviously he can't read, or he's just an avowed liar.
He's a liar. There's no question he's a liar.
Yeah. Now, I would ask you, since all of this is fresh, the destruction of Iraq and the United States getting rid of its secular dictator, the destruction of Afghanistan and the United States getting rid of its religious dictator, the destruction of Libya and us getting rid of the secular dictator, our meddling in Egypt and getting rid of a secular dictator, it's all fresh. Exactly what occurred. Why in the hell are we trying to pursue exactly the same course that has failed 5 times over in the last 10 years now in Syria?
Simple. They're stupid.
No, I don't know if they're stupid.
It's a person who keeps repeating exactly the same procedure, thinking it will come with a different result.
Yeah. Well, that would be insane, as opposed to stupid. It would be insane. But so you think that the Obamanator, the leaders of the West and the United States, both parties, the military of the United States, the intelligence community of the United States, is insane, or they're maniacal?
Maniacal, most probably.
Yeah, I think so.
Because they are heading us, they're leading the world to war.
Right.
China is a superpower. Russia is a superpower. Europe is not a superpower. America has no balls to be a superpower.
Right.
They're going for World War III.
They are. Yeah, for us to galvanize the Middle East so that it is now China and Russia with Iran and Syria, and the United States and Europe with Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Egypt. We're positioning the world for war all around the Sunni-Shia conflict that we started in Iran, Iraq, and Syria.
But this war is not like the last war.
No, it isn't.
Every war is 10 to 20 times worse than the war before. This is nuclear war. This is not going to stay with just standard cruise missiles.
Yeah, this is 100 times worse. The last World War cost 55 million lives. This next war will cost over 5 billion lives. You know that yesterday the Turks shot down a Russian, according to the Turks anyway, they shot down a Russian drone. The day before, an American and Russian warplane almost hit each other. You know, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. And when it happens, when we have insane, maniacal people in charge who all want war, because with war, their power is galvanized. No one can question them. Everyone rallies around the flag and patriotism and makes sacrifices and gives up freedom and their money and everything else to the regime.
It won't work this time. Believe me, it won't work this time.
Well, it's never actually worked.
We will turn to the Stone Age after this war.
Yes, we will. And this war is inevitable, and the sides have already been defined, and the country that lit the match of this war is the United States of America.
It is amazing.
Yeah, and we armed both sides.
For a whole year, missed every single target that the Russians are doing now. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Russia did in 3 weeks more, a huge amount more than what America and 11 other nations have been doing in the last 1 year.
Yeah. And the reason for that is the United States doesn't want to destroy the Islamic State. In fact, we armed the United States. We are the creator of the Islamic State. The Islamic State doesn't exist without America. It is an outgrowth of the awakening program that Petraeus and George Bush created during the surge. It is a direct result of that. It was created to give the Sunnis a way to rebuff the military aggressiveness of Shia Islam once we armed Shia Islam. We created them, and we do not want to destroy them because they give justification for our war footing, for our military-industrial complex.
There's no question, absolutely no doubt. I mean, it sounds arrogant, but it isn't. The military-industrial complex cannot survive without conflict. It is impossible.
America fought 101 wars in the first 400 years that the Europeans invaded North America. 101 wars in those 400 years. It's one war every 4 years. We can't survive without war. It is in our DNA. It's who we are. And so this time, though, we have ignited a war. We have started a war that's going to consume the world. And we, as America, has divided the world over this particular conflict. And we have armed it. And the consequence is going to be 5 billion lives.
You know, as I said once before on your show, again, I never ever supported Russia for as long as the Soviet Union was in power. But funnily enough, I have great respect for Putin, an enormous amount of respect for Putin. He believes in Russia. He believes in his country. He believes in the sanctity of Russia. And he is trying to do his best to make Russia as powerful as it used to be. While Obama and the West are groveling to Islam. They're groveling to Islam.
Yeah. Now, I would tell you that while I think that Putin is a much more honest leader than is any leader in the West.
Thank you. I agree.
And while Putin's view of Syria is the only sane one, which is that The only thing it's intelligent to do is to prop up the Assad regime, because then you don't have 10 million refugees and hundreds of thousands of people dying. I'm going to tell you that, and this is inevitable, my friend, Russia's going to fail in Syria. And let me give you a little example, a little history lesson as to why Russia's going to fail. Russia, at the peak of its power in the 1980s, was confronted by an American military force comprised of the Taliban and al-Qaeda. And we provided the Taliban and al-Qaeda with $5 billion worth of weapons. And they took down the Soviet Union at the height of their power in Afghanistan. There's no way that Russia is going to deploy as much military might in Syria as they did in Afghanistan. And the Islamic State is 100-fold more powerful than al-Qaeda and the Taliban were collectively. You can't win in the world of jihadi Islam with bullets and bombs. Russia is right in Syria, but it's going to fail. We'll be back with IQ and his response to that assessment in a moment. IQ, so there's the United States empowered al-Qaeda and the Taliban to fight the Russians. They took the Russians on in Afghanistan at the height of the Russians' power. Since that time, the United States has been in Afghanistan for 15 years, and we continue to lose. Why is it that you think that Russia will prevail against the jihadists in Syria, recognizing that, in particular, the Islamic State is 100-fold stronger in every possible way than was the combination of al-Qaeda and the Taliban back in the 1980s?
The only reason I would say that is because Iran is supplying now more and more troops to Iraq and Syria.
Yes.
With Russian help and most probably with Chinese help, they will be able to overcome ISIS in Iraq and Syria, but nowhere else. That's an opinion. Because the alternative, if Russia fails, Assad will fail. We have ISIS.
So your answer here is
unconscionable.
So you think here that the reason that they, I'm going to deal with the last comment here in just a second, but you think that the difference here is that rather than fighting with Russian troops, they're going to fight with Hezbollah.
Absolutely.
And that the reason, right, and that most people don't know this, but the Russians and the Iranians are in complete and total control of the army that the United States built on behalf of Iraq.
Definitely.
Russian generals and Iranian generals in Baghdad are controlling the entirety of the American-made Iraqi military.
Well, there's nothing left of the Iraqi military, which was made by Americans. They left 2,300 Humvees, they left tanks, they left weapons, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars.
Okay. So you think that the fact that rather than Russian troops fighting the war, they're going to use Russians are simply going to provide air cover, and that Hezbollah and the Iranian military
and the Iraqi military. Yeah, even the Iraqi military under Iranian control, yes.
And Russian control is going to prevail against the Islamic State.
Because
but you actually don't. You actually do.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Even Saudi Arabia doesn't want ISIS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, though they provided almost all the weapons to the Islamic State.
But now they are regretting it.
Of course. Although they want Sunni terrorists to take over Syria, and they want Sunni terrorists to take over Iraq because they hate Iran more than any other country on Earth.
No matter how we slice it, this is war, and this is going to be ugly.
Yeah. Now, my view is that that they will not prevail. I think that this war between Sunni and Shia Islam is a fight to the death. And that if you get between the two warring clans of Islam to the extreme that we're witnessing now, that no nation can make a difference with bullets and bombs, that the only sane thing to do is withdraw from the region, stop sending them military equipment, and let them beat each other up with sticks and stones.
Yes, but it's not going to happen because the military-industrial complex will not allow it.
That is true. It is not going to happen. That would be the sane response to this.
I agree with you 100%. That's what you said. Quarantine the Muslims. Let them kill each other.
Yeah, here's why I don't think the Russians can't prevail. The Russians now have earned the wrath of Sunni Islamic countries around the world, like Turkey is now turned against Russia. So the only thing that Russia can do to continue to prop up its Iranian client while resolving its relationship with 85% of the Islamic world is to do the same thing in Syria, in the West Bank and Gaza that they just did in Syria.
Yes.
Establish a military presence against Israel that runs cover for the jihadists so that they can launch a battle, a war against Israel with Russian
no matter how we slice it, it's going to be a major war. I can't see any escape. I can't, honestly, I can't.
Right. So by prevailing, all you're saying is that Russia is going to continue to be a contributing factor in what is going to become World War III, and it cannot be avoided.
It can't be avoided. It can't.
Yeah.
It can't.
And then, to that extent, we both agree. I don't think Russia can prevail in Syria. I don't think they can prevail against Sunni Islam. I think Russia will ultimately join Sunni Islam, and the only place they can do that is in Israel, and that is how the World War III will commence. And IQ, you're right. 5 billion people are going to die.
Yes, unfortunately. Yes.
And all we have to do to stop this is to shed our ignorance and be rational.
Yeah. But we can't find the rational people.
Not in positions of leadership, not in any field.